Byzantine Empire, the rise and fall. 1. A legacy of Rome. The story of the Byzantine Empire is more than the tale of a single nation. It is the story of an empire that survived for over 1,000 years, long after the fall of the mighty Roman Empire from which it was born. The Byzantine Empire, stretching across the eastern Mediterranean, stood at the crossroads of Europe and Asia. Its legacy has been etched into the fabric of history, not just in the grand buildings it left behind, like the Hagia Sophia, but in its profound influence on law, religion, culture, and diplomacy. Unlike the Western Roman Empire, which collapsed in 476 AD, the Byzantine Empire endured for nearly a millennium more. This extraordinary longevity was due to a combination of strategic foresight, military prowess, and an unyielding connection to Roman traditions. Its capital, Constantinople, modern-day Istanbul, became a beacon of civilization, housing treasures of art, learning, and architecture. Yet it wasn't just its longevity that made the Byzantine Empire remarkable. It was the resilience of its people who, despite facing countless challenges, managed to protect and expand their empire for centuries. In this story, we'll trace the origins of the Byzantine Empire, its rise to power, the golden age it experienced under rulers like Justinian the Great, its eventual decline due to internal strife and external pressures, and its ultimate fall to the Ottoman Turks in 1453. Along the way, we will delve into the political, military, economic, and cultural forces that shaped the empire's trajectory. The Byzantine Empire wasn't merely a continuation of the Roman Empire. It was something unique, defined by its own set of challenges, triumphs, and failures. This is the legacy of Byzantium, and in telling its story, we will discover why it still resonates today. 2. The Origins Division of the Roman Empire, 285–395 AD. The origins of the Byzantine Empire can be traced back to the turbulent period of the late Roman Empire, when the vastness and complexity of the empire made it increasingly difficult to govern. By the late 3rd century, the Roman Empire was facing constant threats from barbarian tribes, internal corruption, and economic instability. To address these issues, Emperor Diocletian made a crucial decision. In 285 AD, he divided the Roman Empire into two parts, the Western Roman Empire and the Eastern Roman Empire, with the goal of making the empire more manageable. Diocletian ruled the eastern half from the capital of Nicomedia, while his co-emperor Maximian ruled the western half from Milan. This division was meant to allow for more effective governance and military defense. However, it also set the stage for the eventual separation of the two empires, with the eastern part gradually becoming the Byzantine Empire. In 330 AD, Emperor Constantine the Great made a bold move that would reshape the course of history. He founded a new capital, Constantinople, on the site of the ancient city of Byzantium. This strategically located city, situated on the Bosporus Strait, offered control over key trade routes between Europe and Asia, as well as a natural defense due to its position on the water. Constantine's vision was clear. He sought to create a new Rome in the East, one that would rival the grandeur of its predecessor. Constantine's decision to establish Constantinople as the capital of the Eastern Roman Empire was pivotal. It became not only the political and economic hub of the Eastern Empire, but also a center of culture and Christianity. Constantine, who had famously converted to Christianity, made it the state religion of the empire, marking the beginning of the Byzantine Empire's close ties to the Christian faith. In 395 AD, the death of Emperor Theodosius I officially sealed the division between the Eastern and Western Roman empires. The Western Roman Empire, weakened by internal strife and external invasions, would soon fall in 476 AD. Meanwhile, the Eastern Roman Empire, now known as the Byzantine Empire, would continue to thrive for nearly another 1,000 years. The establishment of Constantinople and the religious reforms under Constantine set the foundation for the Byzantine Empire's unique character. The Byzantine Empire was not just a continuation of Rome, but a new empire with its own identity, one rooted in Roman tradition, but shaped by the distinctive cultural, religious, and geographical forces of the East. 3. Constantine the Great, the founder of Byzantium, 306–337 AD. Constantine the Great stands as one of history's most transformative figures. His reign marked a new era not only for the Roman Empire, but for the entire Western world. His journey began in 306 AD, when he was proclaimed emperor by his troops after the death of his father Constantius. However, it was Constantine's vision and his subsequent actions that would secure his place as the founder of the Byzantine Empire, an empire that would outlast the Western Roman Empire and leave a profound legacy. Constantine's rise to power was not easy. He faced fierce opposition, including from Maxentius, the ruler of Italy, who was one of the key figures in the struggle for control of the Roman Empire. The most significant moment in Constantine's early reign came in 312 AD at the Battle of the Milvian Bridge. Facing an overwhelming force, Constantine famously saw a vision in the sky, which he believed to be a divine sign from the Christian God. He reportedly saw a cross with the words, "In this sign conquer Latin, in hoc signo vinces." Constantine, having recently converted to Christianity, interpreted this vision as a divine endorsement of his cause. With his newfound faith, he led his army to victory and secured control over the Western Roman Empire. This victory was more than just a military conquest. It marked the beginning of a deep shift in the Roman Empire's relationship with Christianity. Constantine, who had been sympathetic to Christianity for years, now made the religion a cornerstone of his reign. In 313 AD, he issued the Edict of Milan, which granted religious tolerance to Christians and effectively legalized Christianity within the empire. This was a pivotal moment in history, as it not only ended the centuries of persecution faced by Christians, but also laid the groundwork for Christianity to eventually become the state religion. In 330 AD, Constantine made another monumental decision. He chose to establish a new capital for the Roman Empire on the site of the ancient city of Byzantium. This city, strategically located on the Bosporus Strait, was renamed Constantinople in his honor. The city was a symbol of Constantine's vision, a new Rome in the East, with access to vital trade routes between Europe and Asia. The city would become the political, economic, and spiritual heart of the Byzantine Empire for over 1,000 years. Constantine's contributions to the Byzantine Empire didn't end with his founding of Constantinople. He also played a crucial role in shaping the religious future of the empire. In 325 AD, Constantine convened the First Council of Nicaea, the first ecumenical council of Christian bishops. The council's goal was to address the growing theological divisions within Christianity, particularly over the nature of Christ. The Nicene Creed, which emerged from the council, became the foundation of Christian orthodoxy. Constantine's reign was not without its challenges. He faced constant threats from both internal rivals and external enemies, including the Sasanian Persians and the Germanic tribes. Yet Constantine's ability to unite the empire both politically and religiously allowed him to maintain stability and secure his legacy. By the time of his death in 337 AD, Constantine had transformed the Roman Empire. His founding of Constantinople as a Christian city and his establishment of Christianity as the empire's dominant faith were achievements that would shape the empire for centuries to come. His reign marked the end of the Roman Empire's pagan traditions and the beginning of an era where Christianity would play a central role in the Byzantine Empire's identity. Constantine's legacy as the founder of the Byzantine Empire is clear. His vision for a new Christianized Roman Empire in the East laid the foundation for what would become one of the most enduring civilizations in history. The Byzantine Empire, with its capital in Constantinople, would go on to thrive for over 1,000 years, preserving Roman law culture and Christianity. 4. The early Byzantine Empire political consolidation, 395–527 AD. Following the death of Constantine and the subsequent division of the Roman Empire after 395 AD, the Eastern Roman Empire, soon to be known as the Byzantine Empire, found itself at a crossroads. The Western Roman Empire had already begun to crumble under the weight of internal strife, economic troubles, and external invasions. Meanwhile, the Eastern Empire, with its capital in Constantinople, was relatively more stable, though it still faced its own set of challenges. In the early years of the Byzantine Empire, the political landscape was marked by both continuity and change. The empire retained much of the Roman structure, with a strong, centralized government and a powerful emperor at the helm. However, as the empire moved further into the 5th and 6th centuries, a distinct Byzantine identity began to emerge, one that was shaped not only by Roman traditions, but also by the unique geographical and cultural forces of the East. One of the first major events of the Byzantine Empire came with the reign of Emperor Theodosius, 379–395 AD, who had been the last ruler to govern both the eastern and western halves of the Roman Empire before its final division. Upon his death in 395 AD, the empire was split between his two sons. Arcadius ruled the east from Constantinople, while Honorius governed the west from Milan. This division, though already planned by Diocletian, signaled the beginning of the Western Roman Empire's decline, while the Eastern Empire would continue to thrive in many ways. The Eastern Roman Empire, now known as the Byzantine Empire, was far from immune to the challenges facing the Roman world at the time. It was plagued by internal instability, including power struggles and frequent changes in leadership. In these early years, the Byzantine Empire was under constant threat from barbarian invasions from the north, particularly by groups like the Visigoths, Vandals, and Huns. The Eastern Empire, however, was often more capable of fending off these threats, thanks in part to its strong military presence and the strategic advantages offered by Constantinople's location. The most significant development in the early Byzantine period came under the reign of Emperor Justinian III, who took the throne in 527 AD. While Justinian's reign is often remembered for its ambitious military campaigns and architectural feats, it is also marked by the consolidation of Byzantine political power and the establishment of the empire as a distinct political entity. Justinian sought to restore the Roman Empire to its former glory by reconquering the western territories that had been lost to barbarian invaders. This ambition led to the famous campaigns in North Africa, Italy, and Spain, in which his general Belisarius played a pivotal role. The most notable success of these campaigns was the reconquest of Italy, which had been under the control of the Ostrogoths. Despite these successes, the empire's resources were stretched thin, and the cost of these wars, combined with the challenges of defending its eastern borders, would soon prove to be a burden for the empire. Domestically, Justinian worked tirelessly to strengthen the empire's political and legal framework. His most enduring legacy is the compilation of Roman law known as the Corpus Juris Civilis, or Justinian Code. This legal code formed the foundation of Byzantine law and would go on to influence legal systems in Europe for centuries. By organizing and codifying Roman law, Justinian not only provided a cohesive legal system for the empire, but also ensured that the legacy of Rome would endure in a structured and organized manner. Despite these accomplishments, Justinian's reign was not without significant challenges. A massive plague known as the Plague of Justinian struck the empire in 541 AD, devastating the population and further straining the empire's resources. The ongoing wars, the loss of manpower due to the plague, and the increasing pressure from rival powers, such as the Sasanian Persians, all contributed to the weakening of the empire's hold on its territories. Nevertheless, Justinian's reign was a pivotal moment in the history of the Byzantine Empire. Under his leadership, the empire experienced a brief but significant period of territorial expansion and legal reform. His efforts to strengthen the empire politically, militarily, and legally would have a lasting impact on the Byzantine world and on the future development of European civilization. By the time of Justinian's death in 565 AD, the Byzantine Empire was a much more consolidated and distinct political entity than it had been at the beginning of the 6th century. Though the empire's territorial gains would eventually be reversed, and internal challenges would continue to mount, the political consolidation achieved during this period set the stage for the Byzantine Empire's survival for many centuries to come. The empire was now a unique force in the Mediterranean world, shaped by its Roman heritage, its Christian faith, and its strategic location between East and West. 5. The Golden Age of Justinian, 527–565 AD. The reign of Emperor Justinian the Great marked the zenith of Byzantine power, a period often regarded as the Golden Age of the Byzantine Empire. Justinian's ambitions were vast, and his accomplishments were monumental, but his reign was also fraught with challenges. In this era, the Byzantine Empire reached its territorial peak, achieved remarkable legal and architectural feats, and solidified its role as the center of Eastern Christianity. Justinian's rise to power was marked by his determination to restore the Roman Empire to its former glory. One of his most famous ambitions was the reconquest of the Western Roman territories that had been lost to barbarian invasions in the 5th century. The first of these campaigns was launched in 533 AD under his brilliant general Belisarius. Together, they led a campaign to reclaim North Africa from the Vandals, and within a year, they had successfully re-established Byzantine control over the region. Next, Justinian turned his attention to Italy, which had been under the control of the Ostrogoths since the collapse of the Western Roman Empire. This campaign, known as the Gothic War, would last from 535 to 554 AD and proved to be one of the most taxing for the Byzantine Empire. Despite early successes, including the recapture of Rome, the war proved to be a costly and protracted affair, ultimately stretching the empire's resources thin. Though Justinian did manage to reclaim Italy for a time, the costs of these wars were immense, both in terms of military expenditure and human lives. At the same time, Justinian sought to secure the empire's eastern borders, particularly against the Sasanian Persians. These wars were less successful as the empire struggled with maintaining its hold over the eastern provinces. Despite these military setbacks, Justinian's reign is seen as a time of territorial expansion, even if some of these conquests were temporary. Beyond military endeavors, Justinian's reign is best known for the creation of the Corpus Juris Civilis, or the Justinian Code. This monumental compilation of Roman law not only streamlined and systematized legal processes within the Byzantine Empire, but also became the foundation for much of European law in the centuries that followed. The code was organized into 4 parts: the digest, the institutes, the codex, and the novels. Together, these works formed the backbone of Byzantine governance and legal practices, and their influence would resonate in the legal systems of medieval Europe and beyond. Perhaps the most enduring legacy of Justinian's reign is his architectural vision. He transformed the landscape of Constantinople with his grand projects, none more famous than the construction of the Hagia Sophia. Completed in 537 AD, the Hagia Sophia was a marvel of Byzantine architecture, combining classical Roman engineering with new and innovative techniques. Its vast dome, which seemed to float above the building's vast interior, was a symbol of both divine and imperial authority. For centuries, it was the largest cathedral in the world, and it remains one of the most iconic buildings of the Byzantine Empire. The Hagia Sophia was not just a marvel of engineering, it was also a statement of Christian power and imperial glory. As the cathedral of the Patriarch of Constantinople, it became the center of Eastern Christianity. The church was adorned with magnificent mosaics, many of which depicted Christ, the Virgin Mary, and various saints, marking the growing influence of the Orthodox Church under Justinian's reign. Christianity was becoming more than just a faith. It was becoming the very foundation of the Byzantine Empire, both in a political and social sense. However, Justinian's reign was not without its difficulties. The most devastating challenge to the empire during his rule was the plague of Justinian, which began in 541 AD. The plague, which is believed to have been caused by the same bacterium that caused the Black Death centuries later, swept through the empire, causing widespread death and devastation. It is estimated that the plague killed as much as 1/3 of the population in Constantinople, further weakening the empire's ability to maintain its military and economic power. The long-term consequences of the plague were felt for years, as the empire struggled to recover from the massive loss of life. Despite the plague and the strain of constant warfare, Justinian's reign is remembered as a high point for the Byzantine Empire. The territorial gains of the early years were eventually reversed, but his legacy in law, architecture, and religion continued to shape the empire for centuries. His vision of a restored Roman Empire, though not fully realized, left an indelible mark on the course of history. His reign set the stage for the Byzantine Empire's continued survival, even as it faced new challenges in the centuries to come. 6. The rise of Byzantine Christianity, Church and State, 4th–8th century. The Byzantine Empire was not just a political entity. It was from its very inception a religious one. Christianity played a fundamental role in shaping the identity of the empire, intertwining with its political, military, and social structures. From the time of Emperor Constantine the Great, Christianity was established as the state religion, transforming the Byzantine Empire into the center of Eastern Christianity. Over the centuries, the relationship between church and state would evolve, influencing every aspect of Byzantine life. Constantine's conversion to Christianity in the early 4th century marked the beginning of a profound shift in the Roman Empire. In 313 AD, Constantine issued the Edict of Milan, granting religious tolerance to Christians and ensuring their freedom to practice their faith. The edict ended centuries of persecution and set the stage for Christianity to become the dominant religion in the empire. Constantine's founding of Constantinople as the new Christian capital further solidified the Christian character of the empire. The city became a spiritual center, home to the Patriarch of Constantinople, one of the highest religious authorities in the Eastern Christian world. The early Byzantine Empire saw a rapid rise in the prominence of the Christian Church. Over the next few centuries, the empire became the heart of Christian theological development, with theological debates and councils shaping the nature of Christian belief. The Council of Nicaea in 325 AD, convened by Constantine, was one of the first major ecumenical councils that addressed critical theological questions, particularly the nature of Christ. The Nicene Creed, formulated at this council, became the cornerstone of Christian orthodoxy in the Byzantine Empire. Byzantine emperors such as Theodosius I continued Constantine's policies by promoting Christianity as the state religion. In 380 AD, Theodosius I made Christianity the official state religion of the Roman Empire through the Edict of Thessalonica, which declared Nicene Christianity the official faith and forbade pagan practices. This decision had a profound impact on the empire, marking the end of traditional Roman polytheism and the beginning of Christian dominance in both religious and political life. The Church's role in the Byzantine Empire grew ever stronger over the centuries. The relationship between church and state became complex, with emperors exercising considerable influence over religious matters. Emperors often called councils to settle theological disputes and worked closely with bishops to ensure the unity of Christian doctrine. This relationship between the imperial throne and the church helped to unify the empire and allowed Christianity to flourish in the Byzantine world. Byzantine Christianity was distinct from its Western counterpart in several ways, most notably in its liturgy and theological developments. The Eastern Orthodox Church, as it came to be known, developed its own rituals, prayers, and forms of worship, which emphasized mysticism and the transcendence of God. One of the central tenets of Byzantine Christianity was the idea of the osis, or the union of divine and human nature in Christ, which was seen as a model for human salvation. The emperor, as the defender of the faith, was responsible for upholding Orthodox Christianity and ensuring that the empire followed Christian teachings. This connection between the emperor and the church was evident in the emperor's role as the protector of Christian orthodoxy and the enforcer of religious laws. The emperor's authority was not just political, but also religious, giving him the power to influence religious doctrine, appoint bishops, and even intervene in church matters. However, the relationship between church and state was not always harmonious. Throughout the centuries, the empire faced significant theological disputes, most notably the iconoclastic controversy in the 8th century. The controversy arose over the veneration of religious icons, which some Byzantine emperors, such as Leo III, sought to prohibit. This led to intense conflict between the iconoclasts, who opposed the use of religious images, and the iconophiles, who defended their veneration. The conflict eventually divided the Church and led to the temporary split between the Eastern Orthodox Church and the Western Catholic Church. Despite the theological disputes and challenges, the Byzantine Empire remained the stronghold of Orthodox Christianity for centuries. The Church not only shaped religious life, but also had a profound influence on Byzantine art culture and politics. The iconic mosaics that decorated Byzantine churches, such as the Hagia Sophia, depicted scenes from the Bible and reinforced the Christian message of divine transcendence. The theological debates, councils, and doctrinal developments that took place in Constantinople and other Byzantine centers of learning shaped the future of Christianity in the East and laid the foundation for the Eastern Orthodox Church, which would continue to thrive long after the fall of the Byzantine Empire. Byzantine Christianity also played a significant role in the spread of Christianity to the Slavic peoples. The missionary work of figures like Saints Cyril and Methodius in the 9th century helped to establish the Eastern Orthodox faith in regions such as Russia, Bulgaria, and Serbia. The creation of the Cyrillic alphabet by Saint Cyril allowed Slavic peoples to read the Bible in their own language, further spreading Byzantine Christianity across Eastern Europe. Thus, the rise of Byzantine Christianity was not only a religious phenomenon, but also a political, cultural, and social one. Christianity became the foundation of Byzantine identity, and its influence shaped the empire for over a millennium. The intertwining of church and state helped to unify the empire and gave the Byzantine world a distinct and enduring character. It was a faith that stood at the heart of Byzantine civilization, and it would continue to play a crucial role in the empire's life until its fall in 1453. 7. Byzantine military strategies from defending the East to reconquering the West, chronicle 6th–11th century. The Byzantine Empire's military strategies were a vital factor in its long survival. Over the centuries, the empire faced a multitude of threats, from barbarian invasions to the rise of Islam in the 7th century and the expansion of the Seljuk Turks and the Ottoman Turks in the later centuries. Despite facing a constantly shifting and often hostile world, the Byzantines developed sophisticated military techniques, fortifications, and tactics that allowed them to defend their empire for over 1,000 years. One of the defining features of the Byzantine military was its ability to adapt to new threats. In the early years of the Byzantine Empire, the most immediate threat came from the east, from the Sasanian Persians, who were a formidable force. In response to these eastern threats, the Byzantines developed a highly disciplined and efficient military building, a strong defensive system, and using a combination of heavy cavalry archers and infantry. They were particularly skilled in the use of the cataphract, a heavily armored cavalry unit, which became a mainstay of the Byzantine army. The Byzantine military's most innovative and successful tactic, however, was the use of Greek fire. This highly secretive incendiary weapon, often considered an ancient form of napalm, was a powerful tool for naval warfare. Greek fire could be projected onto enemy ships or troops, often causing them to catch fire instantly. The Byzantine navy became one of the most formidable in the Mediterranean, using Greek fire to devastating effect against their enemies, including the Arabs and later the Normans. The precise composition of Greek fire remains a mystery to this day, as it was kept secret for centuries. Under Emperor Justinian the Great, the Byzantine Empire embarked on a series of military campaigns to reconquer the western territories of the former Roman Empire. General Belisarius, one of the most skilled and celebrated military leaders in history, played a crucial role in these reconquests. His victories in North Africa against the Vandals 533–534 AD and his subsequent campaign to reclaim Italy from the Ostrogoths were central to Justinian's goal of restoring the Roman Empire's territorial integrity. Despite initial successes, the Byzantine Empire struggled to maintain control over the conquered territories due to the high costs of war and the empire's overstretched resources. While the early Byzantine Empire under Justinian sought to expand its borders by the 7th century, the focus of Byzantine military strategy shifted to defense. The rise of Islam in the 7th century brought new challenges for the empire. The Arab armies led by the Rashidun and later the Umayyad caliphates swept across the Middle East, North Africa, and into the Byzantine Empire's eastern provinces. In 636 AD, the Byzantines suffered a devastating defeat at the Battle of Yarmouk, which resulted in the loss of Syria and Palestine to the Arabs. Despite this loss, the Byzantines managed to hold on to their heartland in Asia Minor, modern-day Turkey, and began a long, slow recovery. One of the most important defensive strategies the Byzantines employed during this period was the use of fortified cities and walls. Constantinople itself was one of the most fortified cities in the world. The city's defensive walls, particularly the Theodosian walls built in the 5th century, were formidable with multiple layers of walls, towers, and gates designed to withstand sieges. The strategic location of Constantinople, with its access to both the Black Sea and the Mediterranean, further bolstered its defense. In the 9th and 10th centuries, the Byzantine Empire experienced a resurgence, particularly under the Macedonian dynasty. The empire regained much of its lost territory, including parts of Italy and the Balkans, and successfully defended its borders against the Bulgars, Arabs, and other enemies. The Byzantine military was reorganized into a more professional standing army during this period, and military campaigns became more coordinated and effective. Emperor Basil II, known as the Bulgar Slayer, achieved one of the most decisive victories in Byzantine history at the Battle of Clydion in 1014, where he crushed the Bulgarian army and secured Byzantine dominance in the Balkans. Despite these successes, the Byzantine military began to face serious challenges in the 11th century. The rise of the Seljuk Turks posed a significant threat to the empire's eastern provinces. In 1071, the Byzantines suffered a catastrophic defeat at the Battle of Manzikert, where the Seljuk Turks crushed the Byzantine army and captured the Emperor Romanos IV Diogenes. This defeat marked the beginning of a period of decline for the Byzantine military, as the empire lost much of its territory in Asia Minor to the Turks. The military decline of the Byzantine Empire in the 11th and 12th centuries was compounded by internal political strife, corruption, and the increasing reliance on mercenary forces. By this time, the Byzantines had to rely on hired soldiers from various parts of Europe and the Mediterranean, which weakened the cohesion and effectiveness of their military forces. The Byzantine navy, once a formidable force, also began to lose its edge, and the empire struggled to defend its borders against the rising power of the Ottoman Turks. While the Byzantine Empire was able to survive for several more centuries, its military, once the backbone of its power, had been greatly weakened. The empire's ability to defend its territory and maintain its borders became increasingly difficult, and by the time the Ottomans finally captured Constantinople in 1453, the once great Byzantine military had all but disappeared. The military strategies of the Byzantine Empire were key to its survival for over 1,000 years. From the early days of the empire, with its disciplined armies and innovative tactics like Greek fire, to its later reliance on fortifications and mercenary forces, the Byzantines demonstrated a remarkable ability to adapt to changing circumstances. While the empire ultimately fell to the Ottomans, the Byzantine military legacy lived on in the techniques, fortifications, and strategies that influenced armies in both the East and the West for centuries. 8. The Iconoclastic Controversy, 8th–9th century. One of the most significant theological and political conflicts in Byzantine history was the Iconoclastic Controversy, a bitter dispute over the use of religious images or icons in the Eastern Orthodox Church. The controversy, which raged between the 8th and 9th centuries, would shape the relationship between the Church and state, and have lasting effects on the development of Byzantine Christianity. The dispute began under the reign of Emperor Leo III, 715–741 AD, who, influenced by a growing sentiment in the empire and among some factions of the Church, sought to ban the veneration of religious icons. Icons, which were painted images of Christ, the Virgin Mary, and the saints, had become central to Byzantine religious practice. These images were used in churches, homes, and public spaces, believed to serve as conduits for divine grace and as aids to prayer and devotion. However, Leo III argued that the veneration of icons violated the biblical commandment against idolatry, which forbade the worship of graven images. In 726 AD, Leo III issued a decree ordering the removal of icons from churches and public places, beginning a wave of iconoclasm, literally image-breaking, that would divide the empire. Leo's decision was based on a combination of religious, political, and military motives. The emperor feared that the widespread veneration of icons had contributed to the decline of Roman imperial authority, and he sought to assert imperial control over religious matters. Additionally, Leo's policy was likely influenced by the growing influence of Islam, a religion that forbade the use of religious images, and his desire to distance the empire from Islamic iconography. The iconoclasts, or image breakers, were those who supported the destruction of icons, and they found strong backing from Emperor Leo III and his successors, such as Constantine the 741 and 575 AD. The iconoclasts argued that the veneration of icons was akin to idol worship, and that such practices were corrupting the purity of Christian faith. Their actions led to widespread destruction of icons across the empire, including in churches, monasteries, and private homes. However, the iconoclastic policy was met with fierce opposition from the iconophiles, or image lovers, who defended the use of icons as a vital part of Christian worship. Many church leaders, including several patriarchs and bishops, condemned the imperial ban as heretical. Iconophiles argued that icons were not worshipped in themselves, but rather served as a means to honor the figures they depicted. They believed that the veneration of icons could deepen one's connection with the divine, as the images allowed the faithful to see the holy in a material form. The conflict escalated as the church and state became increasingly polarized. The iconophiles gained the support of many monastic communities who were heavily invested in the production and veneration of icons. Monasteries as centers of learning and piety became hotbeds of resistance against the imperial policy. Some monks and bishops openly defied the emperor's decrees, and many icons were secretly preserved in hidden corners of the empire. The dispute reached its climax during the reign of Empress Irene 797–802 AD, who was a staunch supporter of the iconophiles. Irene, who ruled as regent for her young son Constantine the Great, reversed the iconoclastic policy, restoring the veneration of icons and attempting to heal the rift between the church and state. In 787 AD, Irene convened the Second Council of Nicaea, the Seventh Ecumenical Council of the Christian Church, which declared that the veneration of icons was permissible and even beneficial to the faith. The council reaffirmed the use of icons as a means of honoring Christ and the saints, though it clarified that icons were not to be worshipped themselves. However, the resolution of the iconoclastic controversy was not permanent. In the years following Irene's reign, the iconoclastic controversy reignited. Emperor Leo XV 819–20 AD and his successors reinstated the iconoclastic policies, leading to further icon destruction and conflict within the church. The iconoclasts regained political power, and the church became divided once again over the issue of icons. The final resolution of the controversy came in 843 AD, during the reign of Empress Theodora, the wife of Emperor Theophilus. Theodora, an ardent supporter of icons, restored the veneration of icons for good, marking the end of the iconoclastic controversy. In a ceremony known as the Triumph of Orthodoxy, the iconophiles triumphed over the iconoclasts, and icons were formally restored in churches throughout the empire. The iconoclastic controversy had profound implications for both the Byzantine Empire and the Eastern Orthodox Church. The conflict solidified the role of the emperor as the protector of the faith, but also demonstrated the growing power of the church and the monastic communities. It also left a lasting legacy in Byzantine art, as the iconoclasts' destruction of religious images led to a resurgence in the production of icons following the end of the controversy. In a broader sense, the iconoclastic controversy reflects the tensions between religious and political authority that were characteristic of the Byzantine Empire throughout its history. The dispute revealed the emperor's desire to assert control over the church, but also the church's power to resist imperial overreach. The resolution of the controversy ultimately reinforced the Byzantine Empire's unique blend of religious and political authority, with the emperor acting as both the protector of the state and the defender of the faith. Moreover, the iconoclastic controversy had lasting effects on the development of Christian theology and the relationship between the Eastern Orthodox Church and the Roman Catholic Church. While the Catholic Church in the West did not experience the same iconoclastic tensions, the Byzantine Empire's struggle over the role of religious images would become a defining issue in the religious and political history of Eastern Christianity. 9. The Macedonian Dynasty, the revival of Byzantine power. 867–1056 AD. The period of the Macedonian dynasty marked a powerful resurgence for the Byzantine Empire, which had endured a century of internal strife, economic instability, and external invasions. The rise of the Macedonian dynasty in 867 AD, with the ascension of Emperor Basil, brought a renewed sense of political cohesion and military strength, allowing the Byzantine Empire to reclaim territories, stabilize its borders, and enter a period of cultural and economic prosperity. This era would be one of the most fruitful periods in the empire's history, laying the foundation for its next several centuries of influence. Basil the founder of the Macedonian dynasty, was of humble origins, born in the region of Macedonia and initially working as a farmer. His rise to power was remarkable, as he initially entered the court as a servant to the Emperor Michael III. Through a combination of intrigue, ambition, and military prowess, Basil became the emperor after a violent coup in 867 AD, which resulted in the death of Michael III. Upon his ascension, Basil began the long process of consolidating Byzantine power, ushering in a period of stability that had been absent for decades. The early years of the Macedonian dynasty were marked by a series of successful military campaigns aimed at expanding and defending the empire's borders. One of the most significant challenges was the ongoing threat from the Arabs. Under the Umayyad and later the Abbasid caliphates, the eastern provinces of the Byzantine Empire, including Syria, Palestine, and Egypt, were often subjected to frequent invasions. Basil's successors, particularly his son Leo VI and grandson Constantine VII, successfully repelled numerous Arab invasions and secured Byzantine control over key territories in Anatolia, a region that would become crucial to the empire's survival. The Macedonian emperors also faced significant challenges in the Balkans. The Byzantine Empire was embroiled in conflict with the Slavs, Bulgars, and various other peoples who inhabited the region. Despite the many wars fought during this period, the Byzantine military under the Macedonian dynasty was able to push back invasions and extend imperial influence. One of the most notable victories was the defeat of the Bulgars under Tsar Simeon III. In 1014, AD, Emperor Basil II, known as the Bulgar Slayer, decisively defeated the Bulgars at the Battle of Kleidion, effectively ending the threat of Bulgarian expansion and solidifying Byzantine dominance in the Balkans. The success of the Macedonian dynasty in both military and political spheres helped restore the Byzantine Empire's prestige, and the emperors of this era were able to expand their influence in regions such as the Balkans, the Aegean, and the Eastern Mediterranean. In addition to their military successes, the Macedonian emperors also revived the Byzantine economy, which had suffered in previous decades due to the instability caused by internal and external threats. The re-establishment of peace allowed for the growth of trade and industry, and Byzantine merchants resumed their activity in the Mediterranean, establishing Constantinople as one of the richest and most powerful cities in Europe. In cultural terms, the Macedonian dynasty is often regarded as the Golden Age of the Byzantine Empire, particularly in the realm of the arts, education, and the preservation of classical knowledge. The empire became a center of learning and intellectual activity, attracting scholars from across Europe and the Near East. The works of Greek and Roman philosophers, historians, and scientists were studied, preserved, and copied, forming the intellectual foundation of the empire. During this time, the Byzantine Empire also saw a flourishing of religious art, particularly in the form of icons and mosaics. The preservation of classical knowledge would later play a significant role in the Renaissance, when many of these texts were rediscovered by Western scholars. The Macedonian dynasty was also marked by its strong support for the Orthodox Church. Emperors like Leo VI and Constantine the strengthened the relationship between the Church and the state, reinforcing the emperor's role as the protector of the Christian faith. The Church played a vital role in legitimizing the authority of the emperor, and the Byzantine Empire's connection to Christianity grew even more intertwined. This period also saw the expansion of Byzantine influence over Eastern Europe, particularly with the Christianization of the Slavs. Byzantine missionaries, including Saints Cyril and Methodius, played a crucial role in spreading Christianity to the Slavic peoples, including the Bulgarian Serbs and Russians. However, by the mid-11th century, the stability of the Macedonian dynasty began to unravel. The empire faced increasing challenges from both internal and external sources. The rise of the Seljuk Turks in the east and their defeat of the Byzantines at the Battle of Manzikert in 1071 marked a turning point for the empire. The loss of Asia Minor to the Turks severely weakened Byzantine power, and the empire began to lose its strategic foothold in the eastern Mediterranean. Internally, the Byzantine aristocracy became increasingly powerful, and court politics became more factionalized. The Macedonian emperors struggled to maintain control over the nobility, and corruption within the imperial bureaucracy began to erode the efficiency of the empire. Additionally, the growing influence of mercenaries in the Byzantine military weakened the cohesion of the imperial forces, as the once formidable army became more dependent on foreign soldiers who were less loyal to the empire. Despite these challenges, the legacy of the Macedonian dynasty endured. The era marked a high point for Byzantine military, political, and cultural achievements, and the successes of the Macedonian emperors would influence the empire for generations. The expansion of Byzantine influence in the Balkans, the strengthening of the Orthodox Church, and the preservation of classical learning provided the foundations upon which later Byzantine rulers would try to rebuild their empire. Though the empire was soon to face even greater challenges in the centuries to come, the Macedonian dynasty stands as a period of strength and renewal in the Byzantine Empire's long history. 10. Byzantine economy, trade, wealth, and social class. The economy of the Byzantine Empire was one of the key pillars that supported its longevity and allowed it to thrive for over 1,000 years. The empire was strategically located between east and west, controlling vital trade routes that connected Europe to Asia and Africa. The Byzantine economy was characterized by its complexity and adaptability, incorporating elements of ancient Roman traditions while developing new systems and practices suited to its unique needs. At the heart of the Byzantine economy was its trade network, which spanned from the Mediterranean to the steppes of Central Asia. Constantinople, the capital, was the empire's economic hub, sitting at the crossroads of Europe and Asia. Its location allowed the Byzantines to control key trade routes, including the famous Silk Road. This position made the city one of the richest and most prosperous in the medieval world, as merchants from across Europe, the Middle East, and Asia passed through the city trading goods such as silk, spices, precious metals, and textiles. One of the most significant products traded in Byzantium was silk, which became a symbol of the empire's wealth and prestige. The Byzantines were the first Europeans to produce silk, a valuable commodity that had previously been imported from China. According to legend, Emperor Justinian sent 2 monks to China in the 6th century to steal silkworm eggs, allowing the Byzantines to establish their own silk industry. By the 9th century, Byzantium had become a leading producer of silk and other luxury goods, which were sold to markets across Europe and the Middle East. The silk industry became an important source of revenue for the empire, and the luxurious Byzantine silks were highly prized by both Eastern and Western rulers. Agriculture was another cornerstone of the Byzantine economy. The empire's vast agricultural lands, particularly in Asia Minor and the Balkans, produced a variety of crops, including wheat, olives, grapes, and fruits. These goods were vital for feeding the empire's population and sustaining its military. The Byzantine agricultural system was highly organized, with large estates owned by the aristocracy and worked by peasants. However, the distribution of land was uneven, with the rural population often suffering under the weight of heavy taxes and land rents. This inequality in land ownership would eventually contribute to social unrest and economic decline in later centuries. The Byzantine Empire also developed an advanced system of coinage, which played a crucial role in its economy. The solidus, a gold coin introduced by Constantine the Great, became the standard currency throughout the empire and was known for its stability and value. The solidus was widely used in trade, and remained the standard coin of the Byzantine Empire for centuries, even long after the empire's fall. The use of the solidus, along with other silver and copper coins, allowed the Byzantines to engage in trade across the Mediterranean and beyond, making their economy one of the most sophisticated in the medieval world. Despite its wealth and economic prosperity, the Byzantine Empire was not immune to economic challenges. One of the most significant problems faced by the empire was the constant need for military expenditure. Wars with the Persians, Arabs, Bulgars, and later the Turks drained the empire's resources, and the Byzantines were often forced to levy high taxes to fund their military campaigns. These taxes were particularly burdensome for the peasantry, leading to growing social unrest and at times revolts. Additionally, the Byzantine Empire's reliance on mercenaries to fight its wars further strained its finances, as the empire had to pay foreign soldiers, often in precious metals or land. The Byzantine Empire also had a highly stratified social structure with a distinct division between the aristocracy, the military, and the peasantry. The aristocracy, made up of wealthy landowners and high-ranking government officials, controlled most of the empire's wealth and political power. These elites lived in grand estates, often located in Constantinople or in the provinces, and had access to the luxury goods that the empire produced. The military class, including the imperial army and the navy, played a central role in Byzantine society. Military service was often rewarded with land or other privileges, and the military elite enjoyed a high status in Byzantine society. At the bottom of the social hierarchy were the peasants, who made up the majority of the population. Peasants worked the land often under harsh conditions and were subject to heavy taxation by the state. Many peasants were bound to the land they worked and lived in a form of servitude known as colony. While some peasants were able to own small plots of land, the majority were tenants who worked for the landowning aristocracy. These rural laborers faced difficult living conditions and often struggled to make a living, particularly during times of famine, war, or heavy taxation. The social structure of the Byzantine Empire also included a strong urban middle class. Constantinople, with its bustling marketplaces, craft guilds, and trade networks, was home to a thriving merchant class. Merchants played a vital role in the economy, importing goods from across the empire and selling them to consumers both within and outside the empire. They also contributed to the cultural vibrancy of the city, as many were patrons of the arts and supported the creation of beautiful objects, including jewelry, textiles, and religious icons. In the later centuries of the empire, however, the economy began to show signs of decline. The loss of territories to invading forces, the rise of the Seljuk Turks, and later the Ottoman Turks, and the increasing reliance on mercenary armies weakened the Byzantine economy. The empire's inability to maintain control over its agricultural lands and the disruption of trade routes further strained the economy. By the 14th century, the Byzantine Empire was facing financial collapse, and the once prosperous capital of Constantinople was a shadow of its former self. Despite these challenges, the Byzantine Empire's economic legacy lived on. The Byzantine coinage system, its advanced banking practices, and its control of key trade routes influenced the development of later medieval economies. The wealth and economic power of the Byzantine Empire helped sustain its political and military dominance for centuries, even as it faced internal and external pressures. The Byzantine economy was at its height a marvel of medieval commerce and industry. It was a system that adapted to changing circumstances, drawing on its Roman heritage while developing new strategies to meet the challenges of a dynamic and often dangerous world. From its bustling marketplaces to its vast agricultural estates, the Byzantine economy played a key role in sustaining the empire and ensuring its place as one of the most influential civilizations in history. 11. Decline of the Byzantine Empire, political instability, and the rise of the Crusades, 11th–12th century. The decline of the Byzantine Empire was not a sudden event, but rather a gradual process that unfolded over centuries, marked by political instability, military defeats, and external pressures. While the empire had experienced periods of strength, the 11th and 12th centuries saw the slow erosion of its power and territory. This era was characterized by internal division, the weakening of imperial authority, and the rise of new enemies that would eventually contribute to the fall of Constantinople in 1453. By the 11th century, the Byzantine Empire had suffered significant military setbacks, particularly in the east. The most devastating of these was the Battle of Manzikert in 1071, where Emperor Romanos IV Diogenes was defeated by the Seljuk Turks. The loss of Asia Minor to the Seljuks was a catastrophic blow for the Byzantines, as this region had been the heart of the empire's military, agricultural, and economic strength. The Seljuks established their own state in Anatolia, which severely weakened the Byzantines' position in the region. Manzikert was a turning point in the Byzantine Empire's fortunes. The defeat not only led to the loss of vital territories, but also marked the beginning of a period of internal turmoil. The empire's political leadership became increasingly unstable. Emperors were often overthrown, and the throne became a prize for military commanders, nobles, and ambitious generals. The aristocracy, powerful and influential, often operated with little regard for imperial authority, leading to fragmentation within the empire. In many ways, the centralization that had characterized the Byzantine Empire began to erode as local governors and military leaders assumed more autonomy and loyalty to the emperor waned. In addition to these internal divisions, the Byzantine Empire faced a growing threat from the Crusades. The Crusades, which began in the late 11th century as a series of religious wars initiated by the Catholic Church, had profound and lasting effects on the Byzantine Empire. The First Crusade, called by Pope Urban II in 1095, was originally meant to reclaim Jerusalem from Muslim rule. However, the Crusaders' passage through Byzantine territory in 1097 left the empire in a difficult position. The Byzantines were forced to cooperate with the Crusaders, providing them with military aid and supplies in exchange for their help against the Seljuks. While the Byzantines were initially able to maintain a delicate relationship with the Crusaders, tensions soon emerged. The arrival of the Crusaders in Constantinople marked the beginning of a relationship fraught with distrust and rivalry. The Crusaders viewed the Byzantine Empire as an obstacle to their own goals in the Holy Land, and the Byzantines viewed the Crusaders as opportunistic invaders. The friction between the two powers would come to a head during the Fourth Crusade in 1204. In 1204, instead of marching toward Jerusalem, the Crusaders turned their sights on Constantinople, motivated by a combination of religious zeal, political ambitions, and financial gain. The Crusaders launched an attack on the Byzantine capital. After a brutal siege, Constantinople was captured, and the city was sacked. The Latin kingdom of Constantinople was established, and the Byzantine Empire was temporarily fractured. The Fourth Crusade was a devastating blow from which the Byzantine Empire never fully recovered. While the empire was eventually restored in 1261, the damage to its infrastructure, economy, and military strength was irreversible. The Fourth Crusade and its aftermath marked a profound shift in the Byzantine Empire's ability to defend itself. Although the Byzantines regained Constantinople in 1261, the empire was significantly weakened. The Latin occupation had drained the city of its wealth, and the empire struggled to rebuild. The recovery was further hindered by external threats, particularly from the growing power of the Ottoman Turks. By the 14th century, the Ottoman Empire had emerged as the most formidable force in the region, steadily advancing into Byzantine territory. The Byzantines, weakened by centuries of internal conflict, military defeats, and the impact of the Crusades, were ill-prepared to withstand the Ottoman onslaught. The loss of crucial territories, including much of Asia Minor and the Balkans, further strained the empire's ability to defend itself. The social and economic fabric of the Byzantine Empire had also deteriorated by the 14th century. The empire's once thriving economy had suffered from the loss of trade routes, the decline of agricultural production, and the increasing reliance on mercenaries. The growing presence of the Ottomans in the region created an atmosphere of constant instability. The political system, which had once been the envy of Europe, became increasingly ineffective as power struggles and factions within the court paralyzed decision-making. In the face of these mounting challenges, the Byzantine Empire could do little to stave off the eventual collapse. By the time the Ottoman Turks, led by Sultan Mehmed II, laid siege to Constantinople in 1453, the empire had already been reduced to a mere shadow of its former self. The fall of Constantinople was the final chapter in the slow decline of the Byzantine Empire, a dramatic end to an empire that had once been a powerful force in both the Mediterranean and Eastern Europe. The decline of the Byzantine Empire, though drawn out, was the result of multiple factors: military defeats, internal political instability, and the increasing pressure from external forces. The Crusades, though originally intended to defend Christian territories, ultimately contributed to the empire's demise. The loss of Constantinople was not just the end of an empire, but also the closing of an era. The Byzantine Empire, once the heir to Roman power, became a memory, its legacy and influence enduring far beyond its fall. 12. The fall of Constantinople. The end of the Byzantine Empire. 1453 AD. The Byzantine Empire's long and storied history came to a tragic and final conclusion on May 29, 1453, when the mighty walls of Constantinople fell to the Ottoman Empire. The city, once the jewel of the Eastern Mediterranean, had withstood numerous sieges and invasions over the centuries. Yet despite its famed fortifications and strategic location, Constantinople could not withstand the overwhelming force of Sultan Mehmed II, whose army was both well-equipped and highly motivated. The fall of Constantinople marked the end of the Byzantine Empire and the beginning of a new chapter in world history. The decline of the Byzantine Empire in the preceding centuries had already left Constantinople isolated, surrounded by rising powers and weakened by internal struggles. By the mid-15th century, the once great empire had been reduced to little more than a shadow of its former self. The Byzantine Empire was confined to the city of Constantinople and its immediate surroundings, and the Ottomans had steadily advanced into Byzantine territory, conquering vital regions of Asia Minor and the Balkans. The Byzantine military, once renowned for its strength, had become a pale reflection of its past glory, and the empire's political and economic infrastructure was in disarray. The emperor at the time of the siege was Constantine the Great, the last of the Byzantine emperors. Constantine was well aware of the dire situation facing his empire. Despite his best efforts to garner support from Western Europe, the Byzantine Empire was largely abandoned by its former allies. The Catholic Church, with whom the Eastern Orthodox Church had been in a state of schism for centuries, was reluctant to come to the aid of the Orthodox Byzantines. Pope Nicholas V and the rulers of the West offered limited military support, but it was insufficient to turn the tide. As the Ottoman forces approached it, became clear that Constantinople's fate was sealed. The Ottoman siege, which began in early 1453, was a formidable and sophisticated operation. Sultan Mehmed II, known as Mehmed the Conqueror, brought an army of around 100,000 soldiers to bear on the city, including elite Janissary troops, siege engines, and an enormous array of artillery. One of the most decisive innovations in this siege was the use of massive cannons, which were capable of launching huge stone projectiles at the city's ancient walls. These cannons were an early form of gunpowder artillery and represented a technological leap in siege warfare. The walls of Constantinople, which had withstood countless attacks in the past, were no match for the devastating power of the Ottoman artillery. In response, the defenders of Constantinople, numbering only around 7,000 men, did everything in their power to hold the city. They repaired the walls, reinforced the gates, and mounted a valiant defense. Despite their determination and skill, the Byzantines were severely outnumbered, and they lacked the military resources necessary to withstand the prolonged siege. Constantine the Great and his troops fought bravely, but their efforts were in vain. As the siege wore on, the city's supplies dwindled and morale plummeted. The Ottomans, meanwhile, enjoyed a steady supply of reinforcements and were relentlessly determined to capture the city. On May 22, 1453, the Ottomans launched their final assault. After days of bombardment, the walls of Constantinople finally began to give way. The Ottomans breached the Theodosian walls, which had been considered nearly impregnable for over a millennium. As the Ottomans poured into the city, the defenders made a desperate stand, but they were overwhelmed by the sheer numbers and power of the invaders. The Byzantine forces were broken, and Constantinople fell on May 29, 1453. The fall of Constantinople was a devastating blow to the Byzantine Empire, but it also marked the beginning of the Ottoman Empire's dominance in the region. Mehmed II, who had promised to restore Constantinople as the capital of his empire, entered the city and declared it the new Ottoman capital. He immediately set about transforming the city, turning it into one of the largest and most prosperous cities in the world. The Hagia Sophia, once the grandest Christian church in the world, was converted into a mosque, symbolizing the change of power from Christian Byzantium to Muslim Ottoman rule. The fall of Constantinople had profound consequences for the wider world. The Byzantine Empire, which had preserved Roman law culture and Christian traditions for over 1,000 years, was no more. The loss of the city also signified the end of the Eastern Roman Empire and the last vestige of ancient Rome. The fall of Constantinople sent shockwaves through Europe, and it marked the end of an era in medieval history. In the aftermath, many Byzantine intellectuals fled westward, taking with them priceless manuscripts, knowledge, and artistic traditions. These refugees played a key role in the Renaissance, as their influence on Western scholars helped to revive classical learning and sparked a cultural rebirth in Italy and beyond. In this way, the Byzantine legacy would live on, albeit indirectly, in the development of European civilization. For the Ottomans, the conquest of Constantinople was a key milestone in their expansion. It cemented their control over the Eastern Mediterranean and allowed them to project power into Europe, Africa, and Asia. The fall of Constantinople also marked the beginning of Ottoman dominance in the region, a period that would last for centuries. Sultan Mehmed II, after his conquest, became known as Mehmed the Conqueror and was celebrated as one of history's greatest military leaders. Under his rule, the Ottoman Empire flourished, and Constantinople, now known as Istanbul, became one of the most important cities in the Muslim world. The fall of Constantinople also had significant geopolitical implications. It effectively ended the possibility of a united Christian Byzantine Empire, and it shifted the balance of power in the Mediterranean. The Western European nations, particularly Italy, now faced the threat of Ottoman expansion, and the fall of Constantinople marked the beginning of a new chapter in the relationship between East and West. In many ways, the fall of Constantinople marked the end of the medieval era. The city, once the most magnificent in Europe, was now under the control of the Ottomans and the Byzantine Empire. A symbol of Roman continuity and Christian civilization was no more. Yet the Byzantine legacy lived on in the arts, the church, and the preservation of classical knowledge, continuing to influence both the Ottoman Empire and the Western world. 13. The cultural legacy of Byzantium. Though the Byzantine Empire fell in 1453, its cultural legacy has endured across the centuries, influencing the development of art, architecture, religion, law, and education in both Eastern and Western civilizations. The Byzantine Empire's contributions were not just limited to its political and military achievements. Its intellectual and artistic legacy shaped the medieval world and continues to impact modern culture. One of the most enduring aspects of Byzantine culture was its art. Byzantine art, particularly its religious iconography, became a defining feature of Orthodox Christianity. The intricate and otherworldly style of Byzantine icons, characterized by their vivid colors, gold leaf, and symbolic representation of Saints Christ and the Virgin Mary, spread throughout Eastern Europe and the Balkans. These icons were not merely decorative, but served as vehicles for spiritual devotion, guiding the faithful in their connection with the divine. The style of Byzantine mosaics also became a hallmark of the empire's artistic tradition. The most famous example of this art form is found in the Hagia Sophia, where magnificent mosaics adorn the walls depicting religious scenes with a dazzling use of gold and glass. These mosaics were not only works of art, but also theological statements reflecting the empire's deep connection to the Orthodox Christian faith. The mosaic tradition was carried on in Russia, Greece, and other parts of Eastern Europe, where it became a central part of church decoration. Byzantine architecture, too, had a lasting impact. The most iconic example of Byzantine architecture is the Hagia Sophia itself, which blended Roman engineering with Christian symbolism. The massive dome of the Hagia Sophia, which seemed to float above the building, was a revolutionary feat of engineering that influenced later architectural designs in both the East and the West. The principles of Byzantine architecture, particularly the use of domes and pendentives, would be adopted in churches across Eastern Europe and beyond. The style also influenced the development of Renaissance architecture, particularly in Italy, where architects such as Michelangelo drew inspiration from Byzantine forms. The Byzantine Empire was also a key center of learning and intellectual activity, preserving and transmitting the knowledge of ancient Greece and Rome. During the Middle Ages, when much of Western Europe was experiencing the Dark Ages, Byzantine scholars continued to study the works of classical antiquity. The Byzantines not only preserved these texts, but also contributed to the fields of philosophy, medicine, astronomy, and mathematics. The rediscovery of these classical works, particularly in the 12th century, played a crucial role in the intellectual revival of the Renaissance. Byzantine scholars, many of whom were monks or clerics, were instrumental in the preservation of ancient Greek and Roman manuscripts. They copied and annotated classical texts, ensuring that the knowledge of ancient philosophers, scientists, and poets was passed down through the generations. In fact, when the Ottoman Turks conquered Constantinople in 1453, many Byzantine intellectuals fled westward, taking with them valuable manuscripts and knowledge that would later influence European thinkers during the Renaissance. The Byzantine legal system, particularly the Corpus Juris Civilis, or Justinian Code, remains one of the most influential legal works in history. Commissioned by Emperor Justinian the Great in the 6th century, the Code was a systematic compilation of Roman law that became the foundation of legal systems in many European countries. The Code laid the groundwork for modern civil law systems influencing legal structures in countries such as France, Germany, and Italy. Even in the Eastern Orthodox Church, Byzantine legal practices continued to shape church law and governance long after the empire's fall. Religion was the cornerstone of Byzantine society, and the Byzantine Empire's role in the development of Christianity cannot be overstated. The Orthodox Church, with its roots in the Byzantine Empire, remains one of the largest branches of Christianity today, The religious institutions of Byzantium, particularly the monasteries, played a crucial role in the preservation and transmission of Christian theological thought. Byzantine theologians contributed to the development of key doctrines, such as the nature of Christ and the Holy Trinity, and the liturgical practices that emerged in Byzantium continue to shape Eastern Christian traditions to this day. The spread of Byzantine culture was not limited to the empire's borders. As the empire expanded, it carried its artistic, religious, and intellectual traditions with it, influencing the development of other civilizations. The influence of Byzantine art and architecture can be seen in the churches and monasteries of Russia, Serbia, and Bulgaria. The spread of Orthodox Christianity, along with its liturgical practices and artistic traditions, was instrumental in shaping the cultural identity of the Slavic peoples. In addition to its direct influence on Eastern Europe, the Byzantine Empire's legacy also reached Western Europe. The Byzantines were instrumental in the transmission of knowledge from the ancient world to the Renaissance. The texts of ancient philosophers, such as Aristotle, Plato, and Homer, were preserved in Byzantine libraries and passed on to scholars in the West. The works of Byzantine artists and architects, particularly their use of light and color, also influenced Western artistic movements, including the early Renaissance. The fall of Constantinople in 1453 was a turning point in history, marking the end of the Byzantine Empire. However, the cultural and intellectual legacy of Byzantium has continued to shape the course of history long after the empire's collapse. The Byzantines' preservation of classical knowledge, their contributions to art and architecture, and their role in shaping Christianity have left a profound and lasting mark on the world. The Byzantine Empire's cultural legacy is not only found in the physical remnants of its architecture and art, but also in the intellectual and religious traditions it passed on to later generations. The Byzantine Empire may have fallen, but its influence endures in the world we live in today, from the churches we attend to the legal systems that govern our societies. The legacy of Byzantium is a testament to the enduring power of culture, knowledge, and faith, and it continues to inspire and shape the world centuries after the empire's fall. 14. The Byzantine influence on Eastern Europe and Russia. The Byzantine Empire, though geographically limited to the Eastern Mediterranean, had an outsized influence on the cultures and societies of Eastern Europe, Russia, and even parts of the Middle East. This influence was most evident in religion, culture, law, and governance, and it helped to shape the identities of many nations long after the fall of Constantinople. One of the most significant ways in which the Byzantine Empire influenced Eastern Europe was through the spread of Orthodox Christianity. Following the conversion of the Kievan Russes in 988 AD, the Byzantine Church played a key role in shaping the spiritual and cultural life of the Slavic peoples. Prince Vladimir of Kiev's decision to adopt Byzantine Christianity was a pivotal moment for the region, marking the beginning of the spread of Eastern Orthodox Christianity to Russia, Bulgaria, and Serbia. By converting to Orthodoxy, the Kievan Russes aligned itself with the Byzantine Empire, both religiously and culturally, and this relationship profoundly shaped the development of Russian civilization. The influence of the Byzantine Church on the development of Russian Christianity was deep and lasting. Byzantine missionaries such as Saints Cyril and Methodius are credited with creating the Cyrillic alphabet, which allowed the Slavic peoples to read the Bible and other Christian texts in their own language. The Cyrillic script would become the foundation for the written languages of Russia, Ukraine, and Bulgaria, and it remains in use to this day. Byzantine liturgical practices, such as the use of icons in worship and the celebration of the Divine Liturgy, became central to Russian Orthodox Christianity. The strong bond between the Byzantine Church and the Russian Orthodox Church continues to this day, with the Russian Church considering itself the Third Rome, a successor to the legacy of Constantinople. Beyond religion, the Byzantine Empire's influence extended to the political and legal systems of Eastern Europe. The Byzantine imperial system, with its strong central authority and bureaucratic governance, served as a model for later Eastern European states. For instance, the Byzantine method of governance was adopted by the Tsars of Russia, who modeled their rule on the autocratic Byzantine emperors. Byzantine law, particularly the Justinian Code, also left a lasting impact on the legal systems of the Slavic nations. In fact, Russian law was heavily influenced by Byzantine principles, which helped to shape the legal framework of the Russian Empire. The Byzantine Empire also played a key role in the development of art and architecture in Eastern Europe. Byzantine architectural styles, particularly the use of domes and intricate iconography, were adopted by Russian, Bulgarian, and Serbian churches. The construction of monumental churches and monasteries in the Byzantine style, such as the Cathedral of St. Basil in Moscow, was a testament to the influence of Byzantine design on Eastern European architecture. The vibrant mosaics, icons, and frescoes that characterized Byzantine religious art also found their way into Eastern European churches, where they became an integral part of the religious and cultural fabric. In addition to its religious and cultural impact, the Byzantine Empire's influence extended to diplomacy and international relations in Eastern Europe. Byzantine ambassadors and diplomats were active in the courts of Eastern European rulers, and the empire often served as a mediator in conflicts between Slavic states. The Byzantine Empire's long-standing relationships with the Kingdom of Hungary, the Kievan Ruses, and other Slavic nations helped to shape the political landscape of Eastern Europe for centuries. Even after the fall of Constantinople in 1453, the legacy of the Byzantine Empire continued to resonate in Eastern Europe. The Russian Empire, which emerged as the dominant power in Eastern Europe, adopted the title of Third Rome and viewed itself as the inheritor of the Byzantine legacy. Tsar Ivan III of Russia, who married the niece of the last Byzantine emperor, Zoe Palaiologina, declared himself the protector of the Orthodox Christian faith and sought to preserve the traditions and influence of Byzantium. The Russian Orthodox Church, as the principal religious institution in the empire, continued to uphold many of the theological and liturgical practices that had originated in Constantinople. The fall of Constantinople also had a significant impact on the wider Orthodox world. The Ottoman conquest of the city marked the end of the Byzantine Empire, but it also led to the spread of Byzantine culture and traditions throughout the Ottoman Empire. Many Byzantine scholars and intellectuals fled to Russia and other Orthodox states after the fall of Constantinople, bringing with them valuable knowledge, manuscripts, and religious traditions. These émigrés helped to preserve Byzantine intellectual and religious traditions, which continued to influence Eastern European and Russian culture in the centuries that followed. In many ways, the legacy of the Byzantine Empire was not confined to its geographical borders. The empire's influence on Eastern Europe and Russia was profound and enduring. The spread of Orthodox Christianity, the adoption of Byzantine law and governance, the continuation of Byzantine art and architecture, and the preservation of Byzantine intellectual traditions all contributed to the formation of Eastern European and Russian identity. Even after the empire's fall, the cultural and religious traditions of Byzantium continued to shape the development of Eastern Europe, leaving an indelible mark on the region's history. The Byzantine Empire, though it no longer existed as a political entity, lived on through the nations that it influenced. Its legacy continues to be felt in the churches, the legal systems, the art, and the cultural traditions of the Orthodox world. The Byzantines may have fallen, but their civilization, with its rich heritage of religion, law, and culture, continues to inspire and shape the world to this day. 15. Byzantine art and architecture masterpieces of the empire. Byzantine art and architecture stand as some of the most extraordinary and lasting legacies of the Byzantine Empire. Their distinct styles, born out of a unique blend of Roman tradition, Christian theology, and Eastern aesthetics, not only shaped the artistic landscape of the empire, but also left a profound imprint on the history of world art and architecture. From majestic religious icons to breathtaking architectural masterpieces, Byzantine art embodied the spiritual, cultural, and political essence of an empire that spanned over 1,000 years. The most recognizable and enduring contribution of Byzantine art is its religious iconography. Icons, sacred images of Christ, the Virgin Mary, and the saints, became the heart of Byzantine religious practice. These images were not just works of art. They were believed to be windows into the divine channels through which the faithful could communicate with the holy. Icons were placed in homes, churches, and monasteries, serving as focal points for prayer and worship. The distinct style of Byzantine icons, with their golden backgrounds, stylized figures, and symbolic colors, created a sense of transcendence, drawing the viewer's attention away from the material world and toward the spiritual realm. One of the defining characteristics of Byzantine icons was their adherence to a set of rigid stylistic conventions. Figures in icons were often depicted with exaggerated features, such as large, expressive eyes to convey a sense of divine presence. The figures were usually front-facing, emphasizing the eternal and unchanging nature of the holy subjects. The use of gold leaf, particularly in the backgrounds of icons, symbolized the divine light of heaven and served to set the holy figures apart from the mundane world. The colors used in Byzantine icons were rich and vibrant, with blue representing the heavens, red symbolizing the divine life force, and gold embodying the divine light. One of the most famous examples of Byzantine iconography is the Vladimir Mother of God icon, which has become an enduring symbol of Russian Orthodox Christianity. The Virgin Mary is depicted in a tender pose, holding the Christ child close to her, with her eyes gazing serenely out of the image. This icon, along with many others, played an essential role in the spread of Christianity in Eastern Europe, particularly in Russia, where icons were central to the religious and cultural identity of the Orthodox Church. Byzantine architecture, too, was revolutionary and left a lasting legacy that continues to inspire. The most iconic example of Byzantine architecture is the Hagia Sophia in Constantinople, originally built under Emperor Justinian I in the 6th century. The Hagia Sophia was an architectural marvel of its time, featuring a massive central dome that appeared to float above the rest of the building. The dome was supported by pendentives, triangular sections of a sphere that allowed for the smooth transition from a square base to a circular dome, an innovation that had not been seen in classical architecture before. The Hagia Sophia's size, grandeur, and technical sophistication made it the largest cathedral in the world for nearly 1,000 years, and it remains a symbol of Byzantine architectural genius. The use of light in Byzantine architecture was also revolutionary. In the Hagia Sophia and other Byzantine churches, light streamed through the windows, creating an ethereal atmosphere that enhanced the spiritual experience. The interplay of light and shadow in these buildings was intended to evoke a sense of the divine presence. This emphasis on light in architecture was symbolic of the divine illumination that the Christian faithful believed they received through prayer and worship. The Byzantine architectural style, with its emphasis on domes, arches, and expansive interiors, influenced not only Eastern Orthodox churches, but also the design of later Christian and Islamic buildings. In addition to the Hagia Sophia, other notable examples of Byzantine architecture include the Church of St. Sergius and Bacchus, built in the early 6th century, the Church of the Holy Apostles, and the Chora Church in Constantinople. These churches exemplified the classical Byzantine style, with their use of domes, mosaics, and intricate decoration. Even after the fall of Constantinople in 1453, the architectural innovations of Byzantium continued to influence the design of churches, particularly in the Eastern Orthodox world and the Ottoman Empire. The Byzantine Empire also excelled in the field of mosaic art, creating some of the most beautiful and intricate works of art in the medieval world. Mosaics were used to decorate churches, palaces, and public buildings, and they often depicted religious scenes such as the life of Christ or the Virgin Mary, as well as portraits of emperors and saints. The use of small colored glass tiles, arranged to create detailed images, allowed Byzantine artists to convey complex theological ideas through a visual medium. One of the most famous examples of Byzantine mosaic art is found in the apse of the Hagia Sophia, where Christ is depicted in a grand mosaic surrounded by the Virgin Mary and John the Baptist. This mosaic, along with others in the Hagia Sophia and throughout the empire, became a powerful symbol of the Byzantine Empire's religious identity. Mosaics were not only decorative, they were also an essential tool for conveying religious and political messages to the people. Byzantine art and architecture were also heavily influenced by the empire's interaction with other cultures. As Byzantium was situated at the crossroads of Europe and Asia, it absorbed elements from the Roman, Greek, Persian, and even Indian traditions. The fusion of these influences gave Byzantine art its distinctive character, combining classical forms with a deep Christian symbolism. This fusion is particularly evident in the Byzantine mosaics, which often incorporated classical motifs such as the use of perspective and shading alongside more abstract symbolic elements. Byzantine art's influence extended far beyond the empire's borders. The spread of Orthodox Christianity to Eastern Europe carried Byzantine artistic traditions with it, and many of the churches and monasteries built in Russia, Bulgaria, and Serbia were decorated in the Byzantine style. The art of icon painting, with its emphasis on spiritual symbolism and stylized forms, became a defining feature of Orthodox Christian art in these regions. The legacy of Byzantine art is also visible in the Renaissance, particularly in the works of artists who were influenced by the iconography and religious themes of Byzantium. Even after the fall of Constantinople, the artistic traditions of Byzantium did not disappear. Many Byzantine artisans and scholars fled westward after the Ottoman conquest, carrying with them the artistic and intellectual traditions of the empire. These Byzantine émigrés played a crucial role in the transmission of classical knowledge to the West, influencing the development of Renaissance art and architecture. The themes, techniques, and styles developed in Byzantium would continue to inspire artists for centuries to come. In conclusion, Byzantine art and architecture were more than just aesthetic achievements. They were expressions of the empire's religious, cultural, and political identity. From the intricate icons that adorned Byzantine churches to the majestic domes that graced the skyline of Constantinople, Byzantine art was a testament to the empire's deep devotion to its faith and its commitment to preserving the traditions of the ancient world. The artistic and architectural innovations of Byzantium left an indelible mark on the world, and their influence continues to be felt today. 16. Byzantine society and daily life. A glimpse into the empire. Byzantine society was complex, stratified, and rich in both cultural and religious practices. At its height, the empire spanned vast regions from the Balkans to Egypt and from Italy to the Middle East. The diversity of peoples within the empire contributed to a vibrant, albeit hierarchical, social structure. While the elite enjoyed wealth, power, and luxury, the vast majority of Byzantines lived simpler lives, working the land or engaging in trade. The experiences of ordinary people in Byzantium were deeply shaped by their social class occupation and proximity to the empire's capital, Constantinople. At the top of Byzantine society were the emperor and his court. The emperor was not just the political leader, but also seen as God's representative on earth. The emperor's role extended beyond governance. He was regarded as the protector of Orthodox Christianity and the defender of the faith. The Byzantine emperor's authority was absolute, and his divine right to rule was reinforced by religious symbolism and ritual. The emperor's court was a center of power where intricate political maneuvering, patronage, and diplomacy took place. The imperial court was also a center of culture and learning, where scholars, theologians, and artists gathered. Beneath the emperor and the aristocracy were the landed elite who controlled much of the empire's wealth and power. These wealthy landowners were often appointed to positions of power by the emperor, and their families were integral to the functioning of the state. Many members of the aristocracy held titles such as senator or patrician, and they often held large estates in the countryside or in the cities. These elite families enjoyed a lifestyle of luxury, living in grand homes and enjoying access to the finest foods, education, and entertainment. They were also important patrons of the arts, commissioning works of art, religious icons, and architectural projects. At the other end of the social hierarchy were the peasants who made up the majority of the population. The Byzantine peasantry was diverse, with some working as free farmers, others as serfs bound to the land they cultivated. The rural poor lived under difficult conditions, often subjected to heavy taxes levied by the state and by their landlords. In many ways, peasants were the backbone of the Byzantine economy, providing the agricultural produce necessary to sustain the empire. However, they were often at the mercy of local landowners and government officials who could exploit their labor or demand large portions of their crops. Life for the peasants was hard, and many lived in small rural villages far removed from the cosmopolitan life of the capital. In the urban centers of the Byzantine Empire, especially in Constantinople, a growing middle class of merchants, artisans, and traders began to emerge. These urbanites played a crucial role in the economy, facilitating trade across the Mediterranean and beyond. Constantinople, being the empire's commercial hub, was a bustling metropolis with a diverse population. The city's markets were filled with goods from all corners of the known world: spices from the East, silk from China, wool from the West, and precious metals from Africa. Merchants in Constantinople enjoyed significant wealth, but their lives were also characterized by competition and often precarious livelihoods. Trade was central to Byzantine life, and the prosperity of the empire depended heavily on the success of its merchants. The social structure of Byzantine society was also influenced by the church, which played a key role in both religious and secular life. The Orthodox Church, led by the Patriarch of Constantinople, was the most powerful institution in the empire, with influence over both the emperor and the common people. The clergy, including bishops, priests, and monks, held significant power within the community. Monasteries, often located in remote areas or on the outskirts of cities, were centers of religious life and scholarship. Many monasteries played a crucial role in the preservation of knowledge, including ancient Greek and Roman texts, and contributed to the intellectual life of the empire. Religious life permeated nearly every aspect of daily life in Byzantium. The majority of Byzantines were Orthodox Christians, and their lives were structured around religious observances. The church calendar was filled with feast days, fasts, and other religious rituals, many of which were tied to agricultural cycles. The celebration of Christian festivals such as Christmas and Easter was a major part of life for both the elite and the common people. Monks and nuns living in their monastic communities dedicated their lives to prayer, meditation, and the care of the poor. Byzantine monasteries also served as places of learning, where scholars copied ancient manuscripts and produced works of theology and philosophy. Byzantine women, though often confined to traditional roles within the family, also played important roles in society. Women of the aristocracy were frequently married off to form political alliances, and they could exert significant influence behind the scenes. Empresses such as Theodora and Irene were powerful figures in Byzantine history, wielding substantial political power. Theodora, in particular, is remembered for her role in the Nika riots of 532 AD, where she helped secure her husband Justinian's throne after a violent uprising. Theodora was also an advocate for women's rights, passing laws that protected women from exploitation and abuse. For women of lower classes, life was much more challenging. They often worked alongside their husbands in agriculture or trade, contributing to the family's livelihood. In cities, women worked in markets selling goods or crafting textiles, while some might have been involved in domestic service. Life for women in Byzantium was largely centered around the household and the family, with few opportunities for formal education or public life outside the home. Education was an important part of Byzantine society, particularly for the elite. Wealthy families often employed tutors to educate their children, focusing on classical Greek and Roman literature, philosophy, and rhetoric. The education system was heavily influenced by the traditions of ancient Greece and Rome, and Byzantine scholars continued to study the works of Aristotle, Plato, and other classical thinkers. However, education was largely confined to the upper classes, and the majority of Byzantines, particularly in rural areas, did not have access to formal schooling. In terms of leisure and entertainment, Byzantines enjoyed a variety of activities, including theater, chariot racing, and public games. The Hippodrome of Constantinople was a famous arena where chariot races were held, and these events drew huge crowds. The imperial court also hosted lavish banquets and entertainments, often accompanied by music, dance, and poetry. Despite the empire's many challenges, cultural and social activities played an important role in Byzantine life, offering a temporary escape from the hardships of daily existence. The Byzantine Empire's social fabric was complex, with various classes and groups contributing to the functioning of society. While life for the elite was filled with luxury and power, the common people led more difficult lives, facing the pressures of taxation, warfare, and economic instability. However, despite the challenges, Byzantine society continued to be a center of cultural, intellectual, and religious activity, and its legacy in these areas would be felt for centuries. 17. The Byzantine Empire's role in the preservation of classical knowledge. One of the Byzantine Empire's most enduring legacies lies in its crucial role in preserving and transmitting the knowledge of ancient Greece and Rome to future generations. While Western Europe experienced the so-called Dark Ages following the fall of the Western Roman Empire in 476 AD, Byzantium remained a stronghold of classical learning and intellectual activity for over a millennium. The empire's scholars, monks, and theologians worked tirelessly to preserve the classical texts that would later fuel the intellectual revival of the Renaissance. The Byzantines, who inherited the rich traditions of the Roman Empire, saw the preservation of knowledge as not only a duty, but also an essential part of their cultural identity. Byzantium remained the last bastion of Roman culture, holding on to the traditions of classical education, philosophy, law, and literature. While the Western world turned its focus to Christian theology and the restructuring of society, Byzantium scholars continued to study, copy, and interpret the works of ancient Greek and Roman thinkers, ensuring that this intellectual heritage was not lost. One of the most important ways in which the Byzantines preserved classical knowledge was through the copying of manuscripts. Byzantine monasteries, particularly those in Constantinople, Mount Athos, and other key religious centers, became the repositories of ancient texts. Monks and scholars meticulously copied works of classical authors such as Aristotle, Plato, Homer, Cicero, and Virgil, ensuring that these texts were preserved for posterity. The Byzantines also translated many of these works into Greek and Latin, making them accessible to both Eastern and Western scholars. Byzantine scholars not only preserved the works of the classical world, but also actively contributed to the intellectual tradition. In philosophy, Byzantine scholars like John of Damascus, who lived during the 8th century, made significant contributions to the development of Christian theology and philosophy, blending classical philosophy with Christian doctrine. The study of Aristotle and Plato continued to be a central part of Byzantine intellectual life, and many of their works were commented upon and expanded by Byzantine philosophers. Byzantine scholars also played a key role in preserving the works of ancient historians, mathematicians, and scientists. The writings of ancient mathematicians like Euclid and Ptolemy were preserved and studied by Byzantine scholars, and the Byzantines contributed to the development of mathematical and astronomical knowledge. The empire was also home to notable scientists and engineers, such as Anthemius of Tralles and Isidore of Miletus, who were responsible for the design of the Hagia Sophia, showcasing Byzantine expertise in engineering and architecture. In addition to preserving classical knowledge, the Byzantines also contributed new ideas and innovations. Byzantine scholars did not merely copy ancient texts, but also engaged with them, critically offering new interpretations and ideas. This intellectual activity laid the groundwork for the rediscovery of classical thought during the Renaissance. For instance, the works of Byzantine scholars, such as the writings of the 12th century philosopher and theologian Michael Psellos, influenced later scholars in Italy and Western Europe, particularly during the Renaissance when classical texts were rediscovered. The preservation of classical knowledge was not without its challenges. The Byzantine Empire faced constant pressure from external threats, including invasions by the Arab Slavs and later the Ottomans. However, despite these external pressures, Byzantium remained a center of learning and intellectual activity. When Constantinople fell to the Ottomans in 1453, many Byzantine scholars fled to Italy and other parts of Europe, bringing with them invaluable manuscripts and knowledge. These scholars played a pivotal role in the intellectual revival of the Renaissance, where ancient Greek and Roman texts were rediscovered and studied once again. The legacy of Byzantine scholarship is particularly significant in the context of the Renaissance, when Western Europe began to rediscover classical learning. Many of the texts that had been preserved by Byzantine scholars were translated into Latin and made accessible to Western intellectuals. The humanist scholars of the Renaissance, including figures like Petrarch Erasmus and Lorenzo Valla, were deeply influenced by the works of ancient authors preserved by the Byzantines. The study of classical texts, along with the Byzantine interpretation of them, helped to spark a cultural and intellectual awakening in Europe. In this way, the Byzantine Empire can be seen as the bridge between the ancient world and the modern world. While the Western Roman Empire fell, and much of its knowledge was lost in the West, the Byzantine Empire ensured that this intellectual heritage survived. The Byzantines not only kept alive the works of ancient philosophers, scientists, and writers, but also laid the foundation for the intellectual and cultural movements that would shape the course of European history in the centuries to come. In conclusion, the Byzantine Empire's role in the preservation and transmission of classical knowledge was one of its most significant contributions to the world. By carefully preserving the works of ancient Greece and Rome, and by engaging with these works in an intellectually rigorous manner, the Byzantines ensured that the ideas and discoveries of antiquity would not be lost. The influence of Byzantine scholarship lived on in the Renaissance and beyond, helping to shape the intellectual landscape of the Western world. Even after the fall of Constantinople, the legacy of Byzantine learning continued to inspire and influence scholars for centuries, ensuring that the light of classical knowledge never truly faded. 18. The decline of Byzantine military might, internal struggles, and external pressures. By the 11th century, the Byzantine Empire, once a dominant military power in the Mediterranean, began to experience a steady decline in its military prowess. The causes of this decline were multifaceted, arising from a combination of internal political instability, economic difficulties, and mounting external pressures. The empire, once capable of defending its vast territories, found itself increasingly vulnerable to both internal division and external invaders, leading to a gradual erosion of its military strength. The internal struggles that contributed to the weakening of the Byzantine military began with the loss of central authority. Following the high point of the Macedonian dynasty, the empire faced a series of weak and ineffective rulers who were unable to maintain the political unity necessary to govern such a vast and diverse empire. The aristocracy, which had grown increasingly powerful, often worked against the interests of the emperor. This fragmentation of power led to a lack of coordination and a weakened state that could not adequately defend its borders. One of the most significant internal factors was the rise of factionalism within the Byzantine court. Emperors were often overthrown or assassinated, and the throne became a prize fought over by competing factions. These political struggles took a toll on the military, as military leaders often became embroiled in court intrigues or civil wars, rather than focusing on the defense of the empire. The inability of the emperors to assert control over the military and political elite left the empire vulnerable to both internal and external threats. Another factor that contributed to the decline of Byzantine military power was the weakening of its once formidable army. The Byzantine military had relied heavily on a professional standing army, particularly the elite units known as the tagmata and theme soldiers. However, by the 11th century, the reliance on mercenaries increased as the empire's resources dwindled. Mercenaries, while often highly skilled, lacked the loyalty and discipline of the regular Byzantine troops. The influx of foreign soldiers, particularly from the West, resulted in a military that was less cohesive and more prone to internal strife. Additionally, the use of mercenaries led to greater financial strain on the empire as the cost of hiring foreign troops increased. The Byzantine military also struggled with the changing nature of warfare. In the early centuries of the empire, Byzantine armies had been highly effective at employing both heavy cavalry and infantry. However, as the empire's enemies, particularly the Seljuk Turks and later the Ottoman Turks, adopted more mobile and effective military tactics, the Byzantines were slow to adapt. The military reforms that had once allowed the empire to remain competitive were no longer sufficient to counter the new threats facing the empire. The Seljuk Turks, in particular, posed a significant challenge as they employed fast-moving cavalry and innovative battlefield tactics that outmatched the Byzantine forces. Externally, the most significant challenge to the Byzantine Empire in the 11th century came from the rise of the Seljuk Turks. The Seljuks, having conquered large swaths of territory in the Middle East and Central Asia, began to press into Byzantine territory in Asia Minor. The Byzantines initially tried to defend their eastern borders, but their defeat at the Battle of Manzikert in 1071 was a decisive blow. The loss of Manzikert not only resulted in the capture of Emperor Romanos IV of Diogenes, but also led to the collapse of Byzantine control over much of Asia Minor. The Seljuk Turks quickly established the Sultanate of Rum in central Anatolia, further weakening Byzantine control over the region. The defeat at Manzikert highlighted the Byzantine military's inability to defend its own borders effectively. The loss of Asia Minor was a turning point in the empire's history. The region had been vital to the Byzantine economy and military strategy, serving as the empire's main source of agricultural production and military manpower. Without Asia Minor, the empire found itself increasingly vulnerable to further invasions from the Seljuks and other Turkic groups. The decline of the Byzantine military was further exacerbated by the increasing pressure from the Crusades. The First Crusade, launched in 1096, was initially intended to reclaim Jerusalem from Muslim control. However, as the Crusaders passed through Byzantine territory, they often treated the empire with suspicion, viewing it as a potential rival rather than an ally. The Crusaders' entry into Anatolia after the Battle of Manzikert only deepened tensions between the eastern and western branches of Christianity. Although the Byzantines were able to secure the Crusaders' help in repelling the Turks, the empire's strategic position in the eastern Mediterranean was increasingly compromised by the growing influence of the Crusader states. The Crusades had a lasting and devastating impact on the Byzantine military. While the empire managed to recover some of its lost territory and military prestige during the 12th century, the Latin conquest of Constantinople during the Fourth Crusade in 1204 dealt the final blow to the Byzantine military. The Crusaders, motivated by a mixture of religious fervor, political ambitions, and financial greed, sacked Constantinople, and the city was left in ruins. The Latin occupation of Constantinople weakened the Byzantine military, and the empire struggled to recover from this devastating blow. Though the Byzantines recaptured the city in 1261, the empire was permanently weakened, and its military capability was no longer what it had once been. By the time the Ottomans began their final siege of Constantinople in the mid-15th century, the Byzantine military had been reduced to a shadow of its former self. The empire, unable to defend its borders and beset by internal strife, was no match for the powerful Ottoman forces. The Ottomans, led by Sultan Mehmed II, brought overwhelming numbers, advanced artillery, and a highly skilled army to bear on the city. The Byzantines, under Emperor Constantine the Great, mounted a valiant defense, but the military and logistical challenges they faced were insurmountable. The fall of Constantinople in 1453 marked the final collapse of the Byzantine military, and with it, the end of the empire. In retrospect, the decline of the Byzantine military was a gradual process, shaped by both internal and external factors. While the empire had once been a formidable military power, its failure to adapt to new military technologies, internal political fragmentation, and the rise of new external threats led to its eventual collapse. The Byzantine military's inability to defend its borders and maintain control over its territories made it increasingly vulnerable to invasion. Despite this decline, the empire's military legacy, particularly in terms of its strategies, tactics, and fortifications, continued to influence later military developments in both Europe and the Middle East. 19. The legacy of Byzantium. Why the empire endures in memory. The Byzantine Empire, though it fell in 1453, has left a legacy that continues to shape the world in profound ways. Its influence can still be felt in many aspects of modern life, from religious practices to art and architecture, legal systems, and cultural identities. Despite its decline and eventual fall, the Byzantine Empire's impact on both the Eastern and Western worlds is undeniable, and its legacy endures in numerous ways. One of the most enduring legacies of the Byzantine Empire is its preservation of Roman law and governance. The Corpus Juris Civilis, or the Justinian Code, compiled under Emperor Justinian the Great, was one of the most significant legal achievements of the Byzantine Empire. It systematized Roman law and became the foundation for much of European legal tradition. This legal code influenced the development of civil law systems in countries such as France, Germany, and Italy, and it continues to serve as the basis for many modern legal systems around the world. The principles of Roman law, as preserved by the Byzantines, have had a lasting influence on the development of international law and the concept of human rights. Byzantine art and architecture also continue to have a lasting impact. The iconic mosaics and frescoes with their vivid colors and religious symbolism remain an enduring symbol of Byzantine culture. These works of art, particularly the religious icons that adorned churches, influenced the development of Orthodox Christian art in Russia, Greece, and other Eastern European countries. The distinctive style of Byzantine religious art, which emphasizes spiritual rather than physical realism, continues to be a central feature of Orthodox Christian iconography. In architecture, the Byzantine style, particularly the use of domes, arches, and intricate mosaics, was carried on by the Ottoman Empire and later by various Western architects. The Hagia Sophia in Constantinople, modern-day Istanbul, stands as a testament to Byzantine architectural innovation. Its massive dome, which appeared to float above the building, was a groundbreaking feat of engineering that influenced the development of architecture in both the Islamic and Christian worlds. After the Ottoman conquest of Constantinople, the Hagia Sophia was converted into a mosque, and its architectural influence can be seen in mosques across the Ottoman Empire, including the Blue Mosque in Istanbul. The use of domes and decorative tilework in these structures can be traced back to Byzantine architectural traditions. The Byzantine Empire also played a crucial role in the development of Orthodox Christianity, which remains a dominant force in Eastern Europe, the Balkans, and Russia to this day. The religious practices and theological developments that emerged in Byzantium continue to shape Orthodox Christianity. The liturgical traditions, the veneration of icons, and the role of the emperor as the protector of the faith are all legacies of the Byzantine period. The spread of Orthodox Christianity to the Slavic peoples through missionaries like Saint Cyril and Methodius had a profound impact on the development of Christian identity in Eastern Europe. The Russian Orthodox Church, which emerged as the most powerful institution in Russia, saw itself as the successor to Byzantium, referring to Moscow as the Third Rome after the fall of Constantinople. In addition to its religious and cultural influence, the Byzantine Empire's intellectual legacy was equally significant. The preservation of classical Greek and Roman knowledge by Byzantine scholars, particularly in the fields of philosophy, medicine, and science, played a critical role in the intellectual revival of the Renaissance. When the Ottoman Turks captured Constantinople in 1453, many Byzantine scholars fled to Western Europe, bringing with them invaluable manuscripts and knowledge. These scholars helped spark the Renaissance by introducing classical texts and ideas to Western intellectuals. Figures like Petrarch Erasmus and Leonardo da Vinci were profoundly influenced by the classical knowledge preserved by the Byzantines, and this intellectual revival laid the foundations for the scientific and artistic achievements of the Renaissance. The fall of Constantinople in 1453 also marked the end of an era, but it did not diminish the importance of the Byzantine Empire's legacy. Instead, it became a symbol of the end of the medieval period and the beginning of the modern world. The collapse of the Byzantine Empire and the rise of the Ottoman Empire fundamentally reshaped the geopolitical landscape of the Eastern Mediterranean, Europe, and the Middle East. However, the cultural, religious, and intellectual contributions of Byzantium continued to reverberate throughout history. Even today, the legacy of Byzantium can be seen in various aspects of modern life. The Eastern Orthodox Church, with its rich liturgical traditions and theological teachings, remains a significant religious force in countries like Russia, Greece, Serbia, and Bulgaria. Byzantine art, architecture, and intellectual contributions continue to inspire artists, architects, and scholars. The principles of Byzantine law laid the groundwork for modern legal systems, and the preservation of classical knowledge by Byzantine scholars helped pave the way for the intellectual and cultural achievements of the Renaissance. In many ways, the Byzantine Empire was ahead of its time. Its sophisticated bureaucracy, legal system, and military innovations set the stage for later developments in European and world history. The empire's resilience in the face of adversity, its ability to adapt to changing circumstances, and its ability to preserve and transmit knowledge make it one of the most remarkable civilizations in history. The Byzantine Empire may have fallen, but its contributions to world history have not been forgotten. Its legacy lives on in the cultures, religions, and ideas that continue to shape the modern world. The story of Byzantium is not just the story of an ancient empire. It is the story of an enduring civilization that has influenced the course of history in ways that continue to impact us today. From its art and architecture to its legal and intellectual contributions, the Byzantine Empire's legacy endures as a testament to the power of culture knowledge and faith in shaping the world. 20. Conclusion. The eternal Byzantium. The Byzantine Empire, though it has long since passed into history, remains a source of fascination and admiration. Its story is one of remarkable resilience, intellectual achievement, and cultural contribution. Over a span of more than 1,000 years, Byzantium was a crucible, where the ancient world met the medieval, where Christianity evolved, and where the echoes of Rome reverberated across the ages. From the grandeur of Constantinople to the last stand at its gates in 1453, the Byzantine Empire's influence continues to shape the world today in ways that are both visible and subtle. What made Byzantium so enduring was its ability to adapt and survive. Even when faced with overwhelming external threats, be it from the Persians, Arabs, Crusaders, or the Ottoman Turks, the empire showed remarkable determination. The city of Constantinople, with its impenetrable walls and strategic location, was more than just a political capital. It was a symbol of the empire's capacity to endure, a testament to its cultural and religious significance. Its fall in 1453 was a tragic moment, but it was also the final chapter in a long and storied history that had shaped both the East and West. The Byzantine legacy is alive in the religious practices of the Eastern Orthodox Church, which continues to follow many of the liturgical traditions and theological interpretations that flourished in Byzantium. The empire's legal system, most notably the Corpus Juris Civilis, laid the foundation for modern legal frameworks in many parts of Europe and the world. The preservation and transmission of classical Greek and Roman knowledge, which the Byzantines safeguarded for centuries, spurred the intellectual revolutions of the Renaissance and left a lasting impact on Western thought. Byzantine art, from its intricate mosaics to its religious icons, remains a source of inspiration for both Christian and secular artists alike. Its architectural innovations, particularly the use of domes and pendentives, influenced not only the construction of Orthodox churches, but also the architecture of the Islamic world and Renaissance Europe. The Hagia Sophia, in its many forms, stands as an enduring symbol of Byzantine artistic achievement and religious devotion. The cultural and intellectual contributions of Byzantium extended far beyond its borders, influencing the Slavic world, particularly Russia, where Byzantine Christianity and governance left an indelible mark. The creation of the Cyrillic alphabet and the spread of orthodoxy to the Slavic nations is one of the Byzantine Empire's most significant and lasting legacies. Even after the fall of Constantinople, the spirit of Byzantium lived on through the refugees who fled to the West, bringing with them precious manuscripts, artworks, and intellectual traditions. These Byzantine émigrés played a pivotal role in the revival of classical knowledge in Western Europe, sparking the Renaissance and transforming the intellectual landscape of Europe for generations to come. Though the Byzantine Empire no longer exists as a political entity, its legacy endures in the cultural, religious, and intellectual currents that shaped the course of history. The story of Byzantium is not just the tale of an empire. It is the story of the preservation of knowledge, the defense of faith, and the pursuit of cultural and intellectual excellence. It is a story that continues to inspire, educate, and resonate long after the fall of its capital city. In the end, Byzantium's greatest gift to the world was its ability to bridge the ancient and medieval worlds, preserving the past while shaping the future. Its legacy reminds us of the power of culture knowledge and faith in the shaping of civilizations. The Byzantine Empire, in all its glory and tragedy, was not just a part of history. It was a defining force in the creation of the modern world. Its story is far from over. It lives on in the traditions, laws, and ideas that continue to shape the world today.